Hello, European and Australian friends, and welcome back to the ESC Kelp YouTube channel. Or welcome if you are new here. My name is Matt, and I am the person that runs this channel. And if that intro sounds a little bit different from usual, it's because normally I do a podcast, but this, I think, slightly strays away from the concept of a podcast because the focus will be on the pictures, which I'm going to be showing on the screen. And so that's why I'm not calling this a podcast today. But I've hinted a little bit there at what today is going to be. The first rehearsals for Eurovision 2025 are underway at the moment. And with that, we are starting to see photos released by the EBU. We have got 3 per country as things stand. Although some countries are releasing another sort of those 3 photos again, but wider. So I suppose you could argue there's technically 6, but it's basically 3 photos for each country being released by the EBU, and we're going to have a look at all of those today, and make a few comments on them. Obviously, there's not loads and loads that we can say based on 3 photos. I'm not here about to start saying a country is going to qualify or not qualify based on 3 photos, and I'm not going to say who's going to win and who isn't going to win based on 3 photos. Yeah, we'll get started into this pretty quickly. It's also worth noting I do have here the notes that there's someone on Reddit. This is where, as the rehearsals go on Reddit, someone writes a little bit about the outfits, the costumes, the staging, and so I do have these descriptions here to help us if we need to. But we will start, obviously we're going in running order, so we'll start with Iceland, and these are the 3 photos that we got for Iceland, and as you can see at the bottom, the photo credit for all of these photos will always be there, so yeah, just so you're aware of that. Thanks to Alma Bankston, Corin Cumming, and the EBU for these. But basically, Iceland, the description, they talk a little bit about, sort of, because this was the first one, they talk about the features of the stage. So there's a full width and height LED wall, and they talk about some of the things that we see on the stage and pyro. But we can obviously see that in these images. We can see in the first one we have the boat. That was obviously in Song Kettnen, but this looks like a more polished boat, a newer boat, I suppose. I'm actually really pleased to see this new boat because I think the one Song Kettnen was really almost invisible, like you almost don't even realise it's there. And I think the whole song is about rowing a boat, so it would be nice if it makes up an integral part of the performance, and I think it seems to be that way, in that first picture anyway. Obviously, it's not in the others, but it wasn't in the whole performance in the national final either. The outfits I really like. The silver's a lot of fun, and obviously the sunglasses, but the dancers in the dungarees and the sort of jumpers with anchors and palm trees and all those, and I think there might be a lighthouse, all those sort of nautical themes, and the bucket hats as well, I think is great. So I think the styling's really good for Iceland. And then obviously in the second image, we can see them doing some of the dancing, which is also great. I really enjoyed that. Glad they've kept that. And Vibe in big letters, which I think was really effective in the national final as well. And the final image, these sort of smoke jets, which are good. And this is obviously the end of the performance because they're doing the mic drop. And nice to see that the mic drop's still in it because obviously Vibe are quite excitable characters. And the mic drop sort of, it really fits their personality. So I'm glad that's in. Glad to see the dancing. Glad to see a better boat. And excited to see more from them, obviously. That goes for all of these countries as well. Excited to see more from them all. Then Poland. Interestingly, every country in semi-final 1 had the EB release them in that sort of vertical format that you can see from Iceland, which is why some countries release wider versions, because obviously that's quite restricted. But Poland, I can't seem to find those vertical ones, so we've only got these more horizontal ones for Poland. These are very, very good photos, I would say. Obviously, the first one, that dragon, it's really Game of Thrones. They talk about that in the Reddit notes, actually. I'm just seeing if I can sort of say it's giving Game of Thrones meets Eurovision. That's what they say in the description, and that really is with the Gaia in the text and Justina in the middle, surrounded by these dancers. It's a really striking image, and often I've heard people talk about before, and I really agree with this. When it comes to like the voting recap, and you want people to have your vote, you want people to vote for you. Sorry, you want these really striking images, and that first image is really striking. Um, so they've really nailed that, and that looks. I can't get over how amazing that looks. Actually, that first one. Then the second one, obviously, we can see the dancers at the front and Justina in the air. So they did let her fly. Um, this we can tell that there's obviously this stuff is very similar to the national final, but it clearly has been elevated. Like we didn't have that dragon graphic in the national final, but we have these sorts of arrangements in all three photos. This is stuff that feels familiar from the national final, and actually I think we'll see that a lot this year, purely because there were so many national finals. And if they had a good concept in the national final, like Iceland did and like Poland did, who we're talking about now, then you just want to elevate it. You don't want to completely change it. But yeah, she's fine in the second image. The backdrop, the LEDs look great in all these, by the way. The dragon sort of cloud, and then the planets in the third one where she's playing the violin in that one. I think it's a violin or fiddle, or are they the same thing? I'm not actually 100% sure. But the dancers look great. The outfits look great. The LEDs look great. Poland looks to be on for a good performance. And I know I said I wasn't going to talk about qualification, but I think maybe them being in the death slot had some doubt, and maybe this has sort of removed that just because the pictures do look so good. And obviously, pictures can't tell you anything, like, they can't tell you lots of things. There's lots of things you can't tell from pictures. But because we've seen that national final performance alongside the pictures, we get a pretty good image that this is going to be a good performance. And also worth noting that Poland and Iceland are nice, if I just go back to Iceland, because they are very different pictures, so we get a sort of variation across the performance. We don't get that for Slovenia. Now, that can mean one thing, that can mean two things, rather. One is that the delegation does not want to give much away, fair enough, but I can't imagine there's many surprises with this song, which is why I'm more thinking that actually not much happens in the performance. We do know from the description on Reddit that he will be upside down again, like it was in the national final, which obviously is a bit of a quirk of the performance. But apart from that, I think it will be quite not static, but not static in the sense that he won't be moving, because obviously he will, but static in the sense that it's quite steady throughout the whole performance. There's not sort of any crazy stunts going on like Justina flying. But that's not that obviously doesn't have to be a bad thing. It's just an observation from these photos that I'm thinking that it will be very similar to the national final performance, and it will be quite level throughout. But that being said, the lighting looks really good in these photos. I'm not some fashion expert, so I can't really comment on the styling very much. But I mean, it looks fine. It's not a disaster or anything like that. It looks perfectly fine. The lighting, though, the lighting was really good in the national final, I thought, and it looks really good here. These almost like stars. It really fits the theme of the song, actually. And obviously Slovenia has less budget, I think, so I think they probably have to do a lot of work with the lighting. And it looks like from the small glimpse we've got here that they're doing a good job. Now, the sort of recurring theme that we're talking about here is there's not many changes from the national final. It's an upgrade, but it's been elevated, it's been upgraded. We've said that for Iceland, Poland, Slovenia, and we're also saying that for Estonia. Obviously we've got the bodyguards again. This is a new LED in the first image, this aeroplane that says Tommy Cash on. We've also seen a leak from the artist did these sort of I'm Arrived videos when after they'd done their rehearsals, and in the back of Slovenia's we could see an LED that said Tommy Wood, so we know there's something to do with that. But this looks very copy and paste from the national final, which personally for me is disappointing. I don't like this song, I'll admit that. And I felt that the national final performance was very safe and maybe, I don't want to say lacking effort, but I feel like more unique ideas could have been thought up for this performance. And so it is a bit of a shame that they've had a lot of time to think of new stuff and it doesn't look like they have. If Tommy's happy with it, and the delegation are happy with it, which I guess they must be, then fair enough. But for me personally, I would have liked to have seen something different. And from these photos, it looks very similar. But nice to see variation in the photos, different LEDs, and parts of the performance. We can see clearly from the first one that he's going to be doing the dancing again. Whether you like the dance they did or not, that's personal opinion. But we will move on because there's not loads to say when it's so similar. Ukraine, now this is not similar. Yeah, they're in the description actually. It says they've got rid of the garden. You might remember the garden from the national final performance. I'm just double checking now, but they have got rid of that garden. Yeah, the onstage garden of grass and flowers has also gone. That's a quote from Reddit. So this is going to be a different performance. Ukraine always elevates from Vidbir, the national final. They always do really good staging. So I'm not worried about the staging, but it is intriguing based on these photos. The outfits are not what not what I was expecting. They're a lot brighter. I don't hate them or anything like that. You can tell they're well designed, but it's definitely not what I was expecting. But I think these photos create more intrigue than anything else. I need to see the full package for Ukraine because Ukraine always delivers such a full and complete package, and obviously photos are the tiniest proportion of that. So I do need to see the sort of bigger picture to know whether this is a success or not. But these photos are intriguing, not what I was expecting, but they are exciting. And it's interesting, there's a lot of... Because pink and green makes sense with the sort of garden that they had, but this is a very vibrant pink and quite a vibrant green, which obviously a garden's sort of more muted, which is interesting. But the fashion it seems expensive actually, so clearly no expenses have been spared on this one. Which brings us on to Sweden, when no expenses have been spared either. Again, this is another sort of copy and paste from the national final. Melfest, they all have such well thought out staging, so they can absolutely copy and paste. Nothing against that. We can see they've changed. It's very minor changes. I think the sauna is a bit smaller. There's one less dancer because they can obviously only have 6 on stage. And in that second image, you can see Kevin roasting. Well, you can't actually see the sausage because it's been cut out the image. I think if they released a wider image, it would be in there. But the keynote from the Reddit is that the opening sausage is significantly larger than the one we saw in Melfest. So be excited to see that big sausage. And the other thing that's changed, which you can see in the third image, is that the campfire is now like a sauna stove. So very minor tweaks, bigger sausage, sauna stove instead of a campfire. Slightly smaller sauna, one less dancer, but it looks incredible. No surprises there. This is obviously one of the favourites to win for a reason. It looks amazing, and well done, Sweden, as per usual. Always delivering incredible staging, both in Eurovision and your national selection. So well done, Sweden. Which brings us on to the closer for the first half of semi-final 1, which is Portugal. Now, Portugal was interesting for me because obviously there's a lot of people thinking, oh, maybe it might struggle to qualify. Personally, I think it could definitely qualify. But people were very much saying if they want, those people that were saying it wouldn't qualify were saying if it wants to have a chance, they need to make changes. And they definitely have made changes. Obviously, with a band, it's still the sort of band setup, playing their instruments. And according to Reddit, it is the setup of the band on stage is the same as we saw at Festival de Canção, but they do mention things that have been added, different outfits, and the LED walls, which we can actually see in the third image, they say have some lovely floating clouds and animated skyscapes that change colour in sync with the LED arch, and they talk about there being a dreamlike quality of the performance. So clearly they're going for that sort of dreamy atmosphere. You can see the LEDs look really good. Those clouds look nice. I like the colours. They've got this sort of gold and this blue, and then Portugal always makes really good use of the features of the stage. We saw that last year. They used the boxes on the roof. There weren't many delegations that made really good use of them. So it's nice to see Portugal made good use of that. I think in 2021, was that the Black Mamba? They had that sort of bit on the side when he was walking, and that was a feature that obviously Portugal made good use of. So the Portuguese delegation is very intuitive, I would say. Um, Interestingly, these pictures don't give much away in terms of how intuitive they've been this time. Obviously, it depends on the song and what fits with the song, but the photos look really good. We'll wait to see more from them. Which brings us on to the opener of the second half of the first semi-final. That's a bit of a mouthful, which is Norway. You can all instantly see here there's not very many changes from the national final. We would not expect that from Norway. They also have like Sweden, they also have very good stagings for all performances. They can just copy and paste it. I would just draw your attention to that third picture, which looks incredible with the fire at the front of the stage. I'm assuming he sort of stood in the LED frame here, and we've got fire at the bottom and all these spotlights on him. That is a really incredible image. So fair play to the delegation for that, because that looks really incredible actually. It was probably one of the standout images of me for me from semi-final one, is what I would say. But just having a look at the Reddit description, they just say it's the same. The stone pillars, which you can see in the first image, are back from the national final. There's mountains on the LED, which you can also see in that first image. And they talk about the lighting being off the scale. And they actually reference that third image, and you can see they've clearly made good use of the lighting. And actually, you can see that in the first image there as well. There is a lot of lighting going on. So clearly, Norway making good use of the lighting. And the pirate update is obviously about the flames. And apparently there's jets of flames through the second half, so if you're stood at the front, you should bring marshmallows. That is what the Reddit description says. Okay, so we will move on. Sorry, I was just checking the Reddit notes to make sure I haven't missed anything. So then we have Belgium next. Now, these are really striking images, actually, particularly that second one. And also the third one, they released a wider shot of that, which has like all the dancers in a row, and that's a really striking image. So Belgium doing a good job with staging this year by the looks of things, which is something that they do often struggle with, actually. We know from the Reddit description that they have got rid of that sort of tower thing that they had, the moving platform that they had in the national final. So they've got rid of that. Red Sebastian will be on the floor, well, on the stage, obviously, throughout the whole performance, which I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I was going to say trust the process. You wouldn't normally trust the delegation from Belgium, but I think we can based on these photos. We know they've done something pretty good here, so I would trust them on this. I can't stop looking at the second image. It sort of looks like these eruptions of lava from a volcano. That's really striking, and I think actually they've got something really interesting in Red Sebastian, because he has such a striking image of the red hair and wearing all red. It's such a striking image. That they really had a baseline and something interesting to work with in this staging. And I think obviously you've got to play into that with all your red and your black, I guess, which they've got on the outfits. You can see that in the third image. The dancers have got more black on their outfits than Red Sebastian himself does. But it looks like they've done a good job with this, so we'll await more, as with all of them, as I keep saying. Azerbaijan next now. This is interesting because you get a bit more of the actual staging with these photos, because in the last one you can see they've sort of got these props, which the Reddit description says refers to them. It says that the performance plays out in the middle of the stage inside a lit halo on the floor that's mirrored by a smaller one suspended from the roof. So we can see that they obviously have dancers. I don't know if I was expecting dancers, but I think often Azerbaijan's stagings in more recent years, when they haven't qualified, have felt a bit lower budget. There feels like a bit more budget in this. Obviously, to have dancers, to have these big flame jets that we can see and these sort of staging props. Feels like more budget in this. Maybe they would quite like to qualify this year. But I did see someone point out on Twitter, and by the way, you can follow me there. It's at MattESCKelp. I say random stuff quite a lot, so if you want to, and if you're listening this far, feel free to follow me there. But I saw someone say on Twitter that they didn't think the colour scheme that we see in these photos matched the song. And I do sort of understand that, and I think it's because of the music video. The music video sort of had these electric blues and electric greens, and it doesn't look like we've got this here. It's more sort of black, yellow, orange, gold, those sorts of things. Which I don't necessarily think doesn't fit the song, but I think in your head, because you've seen the music video, and it was very much this sort of black with the electric blue and the electric green. Maybe that's what maybe that's what we've got in our heads. But to me, this looks like really good staging, and I think, again, I don't want to talk too much about qualifications and non-qualifications based on pictures, but I think this does sort of shove Azerbaijan up a bit more towards qualification, or at least increasing their chances. So I don't know if they moved in the odds or anything, but based on these photos, I think that's what you would say. And also just quickly mentioning here that apparently the dancers, there's animated shadow dancers on the LED which mirror the moves of the backing dancers. So it'll be interesting to see what that looks like. And apparently it creates a very cool crowd effect. So we'll see what that turns out like. But then we have San Marino. Now, San Marino was very interesting staging-wise, because a lot of people like this song. I quite like the song as well. But we know that DJ setups don't usually do very well at Eurovision, because you want to connect with the vocalist. And what we also know is that the singers, and you can see them there in that second image, are going to be wearing their masks, and they won't feature very much in the performance, which I think is a mistake. I mean, obviously, I understand that they probably want this private life. They don't want their faces to be shown. But at the same time, I do just sort of think you're in Eurovision. You want to qualify. You've got to put yourself out there like that. And to be honest, I think even if they did show their faces, it's not like they'd receive loads of attention and be hounded. Like, in my opinion, they wouldn't, because the focus is still on Gabri. He is the named artist. So I do think there's a lot of interesting choices here. Sorry, just drinking. Interestingly, it does look like it's expensive. Gabri clearly has a lot of money, by the way. He flew into Basel on a private jet, so. But we can see in the second image, we've got these fireworks. We've got some sort of smoke or fireworks or something, glitter going on in the first one. And also, clearly a lot of different colour changes. We've sort of got gold, pink, and then bluey silver. Loads of different stuff going on here. The outfit's interesting as well. I saw someone say that it looked like one of those blankets you put on, those silver foil blankets you put on someone after running a marathon, which is an interesting comparison, but I kind of see it. I'm just looking at the notes. Oh, also, the other thing from the notes, which I don't think we can see in these photos, is that the two dancers are gone and they've been replaced by instrumentalists, one with an accordion and one with a tambourine. Again, that feels like a mistake to me. The dancers added energy, which I don't know if you'll get from the instrumentalists, and you really needed that energy with the singers being like masked. So, I mean, the pictures themselves look good, but I think there are some concerns here that we're sort of picking up on through the pictures and the description. That's what I would say about this. Then we have Albania, which was probably one of the most anticipated photo reveals, I guess I would say. Now, this is interesting because the outfits are incredible, by the way. You can see Beatrice's dress in the first image. Her mum made that, and also I saw on Wee Wee Blog, shout out to them. On one of their live streams, they found out that it was based on this Albanian folklore story, which is really interesting. The dress was based on that, so check out that if you're interested. But that was really interesting, and Cola also looks really good. This coat really suits him. Now, what is interesting about this? We can see they've got the black and red. We can see that in the third image. But what really interests me are these boxes. Now, in the second image, I think they look quite good. But in the third one, they sort of just look like they're there. But I think with the camera angles, this will be fine. I'm not worried. I think also the photos actually they chose weren't very good. I think they've maybe been they could have picked better photos, or maybe these are the best they were able to take. But I'm not worried about this. I do think this is going to do really well. The photos, yeah, they're whatever. They're fine. There's nothing wrong with them. But yeah, I think that the staging is probably going to be a lot better than it looks like in these photos. Not that it looks bad in the photos, but I think everyone had their hopes so high that some people might be disappointed by these, but I'm not. And you can see this first image actually, if you see the wider photo that they released, is Beatrice walking down the not the plank, the like catwalk at the end to do the final bit in the frame stage. It talks about that in the description I've got here. If I just find it, if I can. Where is it? Let's see. Oh yeah. It says Beatrice uses much more of the space, that's then Cola, for her unique dance routine and armography, which has stayed much the same. And in the final chorus, dances down the walkway for the big finale, and that's what we're seeing there. And I know it's just a description, but to me that sounds really good. That sounds like it will be quite like an iconic thing that happens in any performance. Well, in the semi-final, maybe even in the whole Eurovision this year. But we will move on to the Netherlands. Now, like Slovenia, these are a little bit more different than Slovenia, but these are quite similar images. First, I want to say Claude's outfit I really like. It feels very classy. Classy is the word that I would use to describe these photos. And by the looks of things, the whole performance. Obviously, we've got the violinists, which is interesting, and two contemporary dancers. We know from the description there'll be two contemporary dancers, which we obviously don't see in these photos, so that's good information to know, plus the three violinists and Claude. But you can tell the emotion in this song. You can see in that second image he's feeling every word that he's singing, and the first one he's also enjoying it. But there's a lot of emotion and heart in this. It's really classy. The outfit is classy. The staging looks classy. It just screams classy. I keep on saying it, classy, classy, classy. That is what this is. These photos, they're intriguing, and they don't give too much away. So I would say they've done a good job with these. Honestly, amazing. The song I think is good. Like the song's not my favorite. It's just a good, solid song to me. But I feel like this staging is going to elevate. And some people do sometimes worry, I think, about the Netherlands, that maybe the Netherlands do too little with the staging. You obviously never want to go overboard, but I think sometimes people think the Netherlands don't do enough. This maybe is looking quite simple, and based on the description, it seems quite simple. It doesn't use the LED as much as other performances it mentions in the description. But for me, this song is all about what it means to Claude. It's about the performer pulling it off, and I get that impression from these photos, even though there's only 3 of them. So, well done, is what I would say. And we'll move on to Croatia, which is a massive shake-up from the national final performance, and it needed to be, as a side note. Obviously, the outfit has changed. It's a really nice-looking outfit. It's sort of, well, it says, forget everything you saw at Dora, this is now full Shakespearean drama. That is, that's the description, or part of the description anyway, and honestly, I'm really getting that from these photos. It's giving sort of Macbeth vibes, I would say. We've obviously got almost Macbeth, and he slowly becomes corrupted. Maybe that's by the poison. In fact, I'd be interested to know, maybe if there is a bit of Macbeth in this. in the staging and maybe even in the song, because it does mention that there is a cauldron um on the stage, which we obviously don't see in these, which they're dancing around. And obviously, if you don't know Macbeth, there's the witches around the cauldron, and almost all the dancers are female. Maybe they're meant to be sort of these witchy characters. So maybe there is genuinely Shakespeare in this. But it does look like a massive upgrade. These are really striking images. The first one obviously shows you the outfit, but the second one and the third one are these really striking images. I'm assuming maybe they're showing the difference between the sort of poison cake and the nursery rhyme sort of sweeter bit, just because the green of the poison, the pink of the sort of sweetness. I don't know, maybe that's wrong, but that's just what I'm interpreting from these images. But it's clear that this is an upgrade. Just from these 3 photos alone, we can tell it's a major upgrade. So well done to the delegation. I actually don't associate Croatia with being very good stagers. I don't think they ruin songs with staging, but I never think, oh wow, that was amazing. And this definitely looks pretty good to me. So well done to them. But we'll move on to the final one, and probably the most anticipated staging. The closers for semi-final one are, of course, oh, I clicked the wrong thing. Of course, Cyprus. Now, there was a lot of anticipation for the staging because it's being done by Sergio Hyen, who is also doing Austria and Finland this year. But last year he did Ireland, Doomsday Blue, sung by Bambi Thug, which took what was a borderline might qualify, might not, and it just took it to this incredible performance, which brought it into 6th in the final. And it's worth mentioning that as a combination of Sergio's team and Bambi, that was obviously a really good collaboration. But clearly we can see that the man and his team have talent, because there's something interesting going on here. I think it's worth looking at the description for this. Interestingly, delegations have the opportunity to provide stage notes to the EBU and to the person that writes these on Reddit. I believe her name's Heidi, so shout out to Heidi. And the Cypriot delegation were the only ones from semi-final one that did this. And this is what they said. 2 scaffolding towers are placed on stage, and the performance opens with Theo Evan and the 2 dancers forming the shape of a mysterious figure referenced in the lyrics, a silhouette that will be immediately recognisable. And we now know, obviously, from these pictures, and I believe they said it as well, it's the Vitruvian Man, which is a drawing by Leonardo da Vinci, if you don't know. Which seems a bit random to me. Honestly, this does feel really random, but okay. And they also say, as the performance unfolds, the towers shift positions to create different formations. Theo and his 4 dancers incorporate them seamlessly into the choreography. Stunning visuals and dynamic lighting enhance each movement, adding depth and intensity to the staging. Now, this clearly, they're doing a lot with this staging. I'm not a big fan of the song. I feel like the staging is going to carry this. But there's something going on. Very striking images, clearly, to form the Vitruvian Man. We can see that really well in the second photo there. What does intrigue me, it mentions in description, this is not what the Cypriot delegation said, this is what Heidi said. But she said, the lighting shifts from black and white at the start to black and red in the middle, then back to black and white. So, and also mentions a clever camera effect that makes it look like Theo is dissolving into the ether. So clearly they're pulling out all the stops here. Interestingly, we don't see any of the black and red lighting in these photos, only the black and white. But also, I'm intrigued by the choice in lighting, because, and maybe it's just obviously the music video, but I really, for some reason, and maybe it's also to do with Cyprus, but I really associate this song with sort of gold, black and gold. So I'm really intrigued that it's black and white and black and red. And no gold by the sounds of things, but obviously is what it is. Quite simple quite simple clothing, fashion choices going on here, but I think there's a lot of movement, a lot of complexity, so they can't have anything crazy that's going to get in the way. So these photos do look really impressive, though. The final thing I would say is the scaffolding looks smaller than maybe I would have expected, but it could just be the way the photos look. The stage is quite big, and obviously you wouldn't notice in the camera, because I assume this will be quite tight, close camera work, nothing really wide and far back. So you wouldn't notice that. That wouldn't be a problem. But that does bring us to the end of the photos. I really enjoyed that actually. It was really nice to explore all of the photos that have been released and to have a little brief discussion about each one. I will be doing this again very shortly for semi-final 2. Actually, at the time of recording, we have had, well, the day of recording, the second half of semi-2 rehearsals are going on, which means the day of recording, the first photos for semi-final 1, for semi-final 2, the first half, have been released. So I've looked at them, and there are some really exciting ones. But you'll have to, well, you can look at them whenever, but if you want to hear my opinions on them, then you'll have to come back for the next video to be uploaded on my channel to see that. But that just leads me on to say thank you very much for listening to me today, and I hope to see you in the next video. So bye!